fact of life. In a couple of months now, we're seeing such attention being given to the issues, an emerging consensus within the world community, swift and decisive action in the last couple of days on Libya. This is the pro-dignity agenda, pro-human rights, pro-democratization agenda being born again, possibly. Now, what would happen in other countries and how these revolutions will unfold in the next few months will help condition how the world will ultimately react. Obviously, everyone is interested in good governance, respect for freedoms and human rights, but nobody wants to see instability, no one wants to see insecurity, and no one wants to see chaos.
It's not going to give you a lot of time to answer this because we're coming towards the end of this programme, top of the hour, but are people expecting too much too soon? Because when the Berlin Wall fell, it was a long period towards the sort of governments that they wanted.
I think the management of expectations within these countries and outside is probably one of the biggest challenges moving forward.
All right, well, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to just run through a couple of the main points, and that is that in Egypt, we've heard that there's been a travel ban imposed on the former president, Hosni Mubarak, and members of his family, close family, including his wife, his children, and their spouses, and that their financial assets have also been frozen. We've heard from the United Nations Human Rights Council meeting in Geneva, claims from the British Foreign Secretary that what we're seeing may well be the greatest advance in freedom since the fall of the Berlin Wall. We're expecting Hillary Clinton to talk very soon. Our cameras will be there.
Business Latest is brought to you by Capco in just about everything. Business Latest is brought to you by Capco in just about everything.
As geeks take on dictators, bloggers turn dissidents, and social networks root for social justice, governments are going cyber, spying on their citizens, erecting firewalls like iron curtains, and closing down websites. We ask, is cyber-generated change virtual or real? Empire at this time on Al Jazeera.
If you're a Nokia user, you can download Al Jazeera's news widget from Nokia's Ovis store. The news widget, available on compatible Nokia devices, gives users quick and easy access to real-time news updates from Al Jazeera English. See the world in real time. Al Jazeera Mobile.
Homes have crumbled and many buildings have been left just empty shells.
Tensions are high. Riot police trying to control thousands of Greek protesters on the streets of Athens.
A British court has approved the go-ahead for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to be extradited.
The Gaddafi is waging a war against the Libyan people. They are killing civilians mercilessly. They're using ammunition, live ammunition.
This is Al Jazeera.
Time for the news. Good to have you with us, David Foster, broadcasting from Al Jazeera's news centres here in Doha, our headquarters. Also live from Egypt, Libya, Yemen and Washington, D.C. with the top global stories. Egypt's public prosecutor imposes a travel ban and asset freeze on the former president Hosni Mubarak and his family. In Libya, Gaddafi's son appears to arm his supporters as a town near Tripoli braces for a brutal fight back by Libyan troops. UN Human Rights Council in crisis mode with Western leaders saying one after another, Gaddafi must go. And Yemen's president under pressure as the opposition rejects his offer of a national unity government. Starting this news out in Egypt, where the public prosecutor has slapped a travel ban on the former president Hosni Mubarak and his entire family, pending what are described as further investigations. And he's also ordered a freeze on their finances inside the country. There was a previous order to freeze the family's financial assets abroad. Well, Mubarak is the most high-profile and most senior official of the previous regime to have a travel ban imposed on him. Ayman Mohyeddin is in Cairo for us now. Ayman, obviously, he can't leave the country and obviously he can't touch his money, but otherwise, what does this mean?
Well, you know, at this particular stage, it's undoubtedly a very important symbolic step because as we have seen over the course of the last several weeks, every time a travel ban is imposed as well as a freezing of financial assets belonging to former key officials of the regime, the immediate thing that begins immediately after it is a criminal investigation. And so far, we have been seeing indictments being brought against these officials. Now, if we are to assume that a similar legal trajectory is going to happen against the former president, then we certainly can expect a criminal investigation to be launched, which is probably already underway. And perhaps we can see indictments against the former president and some of his close associates, perhaps even including his two sons. So at this particular stage, it is really a very important step, a very important message that is being delivered to people across the country, which is that nobody from the former regime will be out of the reach of the current general prosecutor.
Is the prosecutor saying whether either Mubarak has already been interviewed by the criminal investigators or whether he will be interviewed in person by the criminal investigators?
Well, it certainly hasn't happened yet. What we have seen happen in terms of the legal proceedings, now that this travel ban has been imposed and the assets frozen, the criminal investigation will begin, expected to perhaps even begin as early as next week, we are told. And in the event that does happen, you can certainly expect that somebody will be sending President Hosni Mubarak or the former President Hosni Mubarak questions that he must answer and account for. Now, it may not necessarily be he who answers them directly, it may be his lawyers, but there's no doubt that the travel ban in of itself means that the general prosecutor and the current leadership of this country wants the former president investigated for alleged wrongdoings. There will be those, though, who will also be very critical and say it is coming a little too late, that the president now has had nearly 2 weeks since he's left office, perhaps even longer since the revolution began on January the 25th. That was plenty of time for him and his close associates and his two children to perhaps conceal some of these financial assets, move them to offshore accounts, put them in other people's names. So there's certainly a criticism against the general prosecutor for not doing this soon enough, given the fact that immediately after the president stepped down, other cases, similar cases, were immediately brought against former top officials serving under former President Mubarak.
Thank you, Ayman Mohyeddin in Cairo. Shadi Ham is with us from the Brookings Centre in Doha. Will there be those within Egypt and outside Egypt who would find it an embarrassment to see Hosni Mubarak in court for whatever reason?
Well, there will definitely be some Egyptians who aren't going to feel comfortable with this and would see this as evidence that the revolution is going too far, the demands are too maximal and things of that nature. But it's clear that this is something that protesters have been asking for some time, for the president to be held to account and to make clear that he's not above the law. And of course, one of the big things that's been discussed in Egypt is the billions of dollars that have been disappeared or embezzled that belong to the Mubarak family. So that's been a big concern the last few weeks, and now something's being done about it.
But it won't just be on financial charges, as we understand it. There's a criminal investigation going on at the moment. Do you think it's possible that that could include human rights abuses during his time in power?
Well, this could be a prelude to Mubarak being tried in a public court of law. That would obviously be a big and unprecedented step. That's not the kind of thing that we see in the Arab world. But that has been, again, one of the demands that we're hearing, at least from one subsection of the protest movement.
OK, Shadi, thank you very much indeed. That's Shadi Hamid from the Brookings Doha Centre. More from you a little bit later on. We're going to go back to that Egyptian story just as soon as we get somebody on the phone to talk about what's happening to the former president, Hosni Mubarak. But what about the current Libyan leader, Muammar Gaddafi? Well, it looks as though he's launching counterattacks in parts of the country, despite protesters taking much of Libya for themselves. They have control of AlJazeera, just 50 kilometers west of the capital, Tripoli. But troops loyal to Gaddafi have now reportedly surrounded the town. 3 more areas in the east are said to be under the control of anti-government protesters. But we are here at Al Jazeera receiving reports of ongoing skirmishes in Misrata, about 200 kilometers east of Tripoli. Well, these are new pictures which appear to show the son of the Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi arming government supporters. Saif al-Islam is trying to prop up his father's regime as anti-government protesters close in on Gaddafi's stronghold. Well, Libya has been top of the agenda at a meeting of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, attended by foreign ministers from around the world. European Union Foreign Policy Head Catherine Ashton said grave human rights violations were still occurring in Libya, and she said that those responsible must be held to account. There we see the Australian Foreign Minister, Kevin Rudd. And you see here so many of those people, foreigners, continuing to pour out of Libya. More and more countries are pledging to send aid in amid warnings of food and medical shortages. They look very happy, but a great many people appear to be stuck at the borders, also worried about what might be happening, those inside the country. More from Lawrence Lee.
You'd be forgiven for thinking that if a town only half an hour from Tripoli is in the hands of protesters with tanks, then the end must surely be near. Yet the days drift by, momentum ebbs and flows, and for the time being, Gaddafi's regime has enough to avoid falling to the people's uprising. Given the routine way in which Gaddafi's armed forces have been switching allegiances over the last few days, one of the questions that keeps being raised is how are the Gaddafis maintaining a fighting force? Up until now, the chief spokesman for Gaddafi has been his son, Saif al-Islam. He has routinely accused the media of lying about the fighting. Maintaining Libya is entirely at peace with itself.
The point that you are hearing rumors, false reports, please take your camera tomorrow morning, even this night, go to every city in Libya. Everything is calm, everything is peaceful.
And yet this has now emerged. The same man, semi-automatic in hand, exhorting people to fight for his father.
I'm here to raise your morale. They are spreading rumours that our police and security forces are joining the hooligans. It's not true. Today we'll show them that the police are siding with Libya. I'm bringing you reinforcements, resources, food, weapons, everything you need.
Discounting the irony that Saif al-Islam Gaddafi has warned about the prospects of civil war while seeming to arm a militia is the question of the extent of Gaddafi's regular military forces. This is the Bainin air base, said to be one of the most important in the country. The military here say they've joined the uprising.
The whole base responded to my call to join the People's Revolution. We have great staff. As military personnel, we want to be clear that this is not a military coup. We are not leading anything. This is a people's revolution led by the youth. Our role is to protect and support it. That's our main aim.
Away from the headline towns, it appears that little places too, where Gaddafi has assumed control for decades, are quietly realigning themselves. This Facebook video is said to be from Zintan, southwest of Tripoli and near the Tunisian border. Enough men with arms here to protect a fuel convoy. This video, also from Facebook, is from a tiny-looking place called Kakla al-Jabal, also in the west. They raised the flag of protest here unnoticed, but it's another community lost to Gaddafi. If Western Libya remains on a knife edge and will determine Gaddafi's fate, all the reports from the east suggest people trying to get on with life after Gaddafi anyway. The other big question is whether cities like Benghazi actually want to move on Tripoli, or whether they're happy to let Tripoli decide its own fate. Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera.
Well, let's ask Khuda Abdul Hamid, who's in Benghazi, what the people of that city actually do want. I mean, I don't know whether there's a collective view or not, Hoda, but it looks a lot better.